Welcome to ExHub MCQs Channel. This chapter on heredity explores 100 expert-crafted MCQs to deepen your understanding of genetic inheritance and variation. MCQ 1. What is the primary source of variations in sexually reproducing organisms? Option A. Environmental factors. Option B. Errors in DNA replication. Option C. Sexual reproduction. Option D. Random mutations. The correct answer is option C, sexual reproduction. Explanation: sexual reproduction introduces a mix of genetic material from two parents, leading to greater diversity. These variations may enhance survival in changing environments, forming a key mechanism of evolution. And 2. How do asexually reproducing organisms generate variation among offspring? Option A, sexual recombination. Option B, DNA copying errors. Option C, environmental changes. Option D, dominant traits. The correct answer is option B, DNA copying errors. Explanation: in asexual reproduction, variations arise due to minor errors during DNA replication. While these differences are small, they can contribute to adaptation over time if beneficial in specific environments. MCQ 3. What is the basis for Mendel's rules of inheritance? Option A, dominance of traits. Option B, equal genetic contribution. Option C, mutation theory. Option D, chromosome pairing. The correct answer is option B, equal genetic contribution. Explanation: Mendel's experiments demonstrated that both parents contribute equally to the offspring's genetic material, resulting in traits influenced by paternal and maternal DNA. This forms the basis of the rules of inheritance. MCQ 4. What feature of Mendel's pea plant experiments ensured accurate results? Option A, observation of one generation. Option B, use of contrasting traits. Option C, focus on dominant traits. Option D, counting individuals. The correct answer is option D, counting individuals. Explanation: Mendel meticulously counted individuals exhibiting specific traits across generations, allowing him to formulate the laws of inheritance and patterns such as dominant and recessive traits. MCQ 5. Why were no medium-height plants observed in Mendel's F1 generation of pea plants? Option A, mutation of genes. Option B, dominance of the tall trait. Option C, incomplete inheritance. Option D, equal genetic mixing. The correct answer is option B, dominance of the tall trait. Explanation: Mendel observed that in the F1 generation, only the tall trait was expressed because it was dominant, while the short trait remained unexpressed but present in the genetic makeup of the plants. MCQ 6. What ratio did Mendel observe for tall and short plants in the F2 generation? Option A, 3:1. Option B, 1:3. Option C, 1:1. Option D, 2:2. The correct answer is option A, 3:1. Explanation: Mendel's F2 generation showed a phenotypic ratio of 3, confirmed that both traits tall and short were inherited, but the tall trait was dominant. MCQ 7. How many sets of genes does each sexually reproducing organism inherit? Option A, 1 from mother. Option B, 1 from father. 2, 1 from each parent. Option D, depends on traits. The correct answer is option C, 2, 1 from each parent. Explanation: sexually reproducing organisms inherit one set of genes from each parent, ensuring genetic diversity and stability of traits. This mechanism is crucial for variation and inheritance. MCQ 8. What determines the sex of a human child? Option A, mother's chromosomes. Option B, father's chromosomes. Equal contribution of both. Option D, environmental factors. The correct answer is option B, father's chromosomes. Explanation: the sex of a human child is determined by the father's chromosomes. An X chromosome results in a girl, while a Y chromosome results in a boy, as mothers contribute only X chromosomes. MQ 9. What is a gene? Option A, a protein. Option B, a section of DNA. Option C, a chromosome. Option D, a type of RNA. The correct answer is option B, a section of DNA. Explanation: a gene is a section of DNA that provides instructions for synthesizing specific proteins. These proteins control various traits and characteristics in living organisms. 10. What explains the independent inheritance of traits like seed shape and color in peas? Option A, DNA mutations. Option B, linked chromosomes. Option C, unlinked chromosomes. Option D, dominant traits. The correct answer is option C, unlinked chromosomes. Explanation: Mendel found that traits like seed shape and color are inherited independently because they are controlled by unlinked chromosomes. This principle is known as the law of independent assortment. MCQ 11. What happens to the number of chromosomes during the formation of germ cells? Option A, doubles. Option remains the same. Option C, reduces to half. Option D, becomes 0. The correct answer is option C, reduces to half. Explanation: during germ cell formation, the chromosome number is reduced to half. This ensures that when male and female gametes combine during fertilization, the offspring has the correct chromosome number. MC 12. What kind of chromosomes do women have? Option A, 1X and 1Y. Option B, 2X chromosomes. Option C, 1Y chromosome. Option D, 2Y chromosomes. The correct answer is option B, 2X chromosomes. Explanation: women have 2X chromosomes, X. In contrast, men have 1X and 1Y chromosome, XY. The X and Y chromosomes play a critical role in determining the sex of the offspring. What is the key mechanism that ensures stability of DNA in sexually reproducing species? Option A, genetic mutations. Option B, Option C, chromosome pairing. Option D, DNA copying. The correct answer is option C, chromosome pairing. Explanation: chromosome pairing ensures that each germ cell receives one chromosome from each pair. This mechanism contributes to the stability of DNA across generations while allowing variations for evolutionary adaptation. MCQ: what determines whether a trait is dominant or recessive? Option A, chromosome count. Option B, protein production. Option C, gene interaction. Option D, DNA replication. The correct answer is option B, protein production. Explanation: dominant traits are determined by genes that lead to the production of functional proteins, whereas recessive traits arise when such protein production is absent or insufficient due to gene alterations. MC 15. How does temperature influence sex determination in some species? Option A, by altering chromosomes. Option B, by changing DNA structure. Option C, by environmental cues. Option D, by affecting fertilization. The correct answer is option C, by environmental cues. Explanation: in certain reptiles, the sex of offspring is determined by the incubation temperature of fertilized eggs. This contrasts with genetic determination of sex as seen in humans. M16. What did Mendel conclude about traits that appear in the F1 generation but not in F2? Option A, they disappear. Option B, they mutate. They are recessive. Option D, they are dominant. The correct answer is option C, they are recessive. Explanation: Mendel found that traits not appearing in the F1 generation but reappearing in the F2 generation are recessive. Recessive traits are masked by dominant ones in heterozygous individuals. MC, what ratio did Mendel find for independent inheritance of two traits in F2 progeny? Option A, 1:1. Option B, 9:3:1. Option C. Option D, 1:1. The correct answer is option B, 9:3:1:1. Explanation: Mendel observed a 9:3:1 ratio in the F2 generation for two independently inherited traits. This confirmed that traits like seed shape and color are independently sorted during gamete formation. MCQ 18. What is the function of proteins in determining traits? Option A, to create mutations. To build chromosomes. Option C, to control traits. Option D, to express dominance. The correct answer is option C, to control traits. Explanation. Proteins synthesized from genes control traits by determining physical and physiological characteristics. For example, proteins involved in hormone production can influence plant height or other traits. MC 19. What causes variation in offspring of sexually reproducing organisms? Option A, asexual reproduction. Option B, errors in DNA copying. Option C, combination of genes. Option D, identical genes. The correct answer is option C, combination of genes. Explanation. Variations in sexually reproducing organisms result from the combination of genes inherited from both parents. This genetic recombination increases diversity and contributes to adaptability. MCQ 20. What is the chromosomal makeup of a male human? Option A, X. Option B, XY. Option C, YY. Option D, X. The correct answer is option B, XY. Explanation. Males have an XY chromosomal pattern, with the X chromosome inherited from the mother and the Y chromosome inherited from the father. The Y chromosome determines the male sex. MQ 21. What process ensures equal genetic contribution from male and female parents in offspring? Option A, mutation. Option B, DNA copying. Fertilization. Option D, cell division. The correct answer is option C, fertilization. Explanation. Fertilization ensures equal genetic contribution by combining one set of chromosomes from the male parent sperm and one from the female parent egg, creating a zygote with two sets of chromosomes. MC 22. What did Mendel observe when tall pea plants were crossed with short ones? Option A, all progeny were tall. Option B, all progeny were short. Option C, progeny were medium height. Option D, half were tall and half were short. The correct answer is option A, all progeny were tall. Explanation. Mendel observed that all F1 progeny were tall, demonstrating the dominance of the tall trait. However, the short trait reappeared in the F2 generation, indicating it was recessive. MC 23. What determines the inheritance pattern of sex in humans? Option A, environmental factors. Option B, parental chromosomes. Option C, hormonal changes. Option D, DNA mutations. The correct answer is option B, parental chromosomes. Explanation. The inheritance pattern of sex in humans is determined by the parental chromosomes. The father's contribution of an X or Y chromosome determines whether the child will be female, XX, or male, XY. MP24. Why are variations important in a species? Option A, they hinder survival. Option B, they reduce diversity. Option C, they promote evolution. Option D, they prevent reproduction. The correct answer is option C, they promote evolution. Explanation. Variations are essential for evolution as they help individuals adapt to environmental changes. Beneficial variations are selected through natural selection, increasing the chances of survival of the species. MCQ 25. What did Mendel use to demonstrate independent inheritance of traits? Option A, tall and short plants. Option B, pea seed shape and color. Flower size and color. Option D, height and root type. The correct answer is option B, pea seed shape and color. Explanation. Mendel used pea seed shape, round wrinkled, and seed color, yellow-green, to demonstrate that these traits are inherited independently, leading to combinations such as round yellow or wrinkled green seeds in the progeny. What is the role of DNA in heredity? Option A, to determine behavior. Option B, to code for proteins, to produce energy. Option D, to transport nutrients. The correct answer is option B, to code for proteins. Explanation. DNA acts as the genetic material that stores information for protein synthesis. These proteins influence traits, making DNA the fundamental molecule responsible for heredity and variation across generations. 27. How do asexually reproducing organisms achieve stability in inheritance? Option A, by creating gametes. By copying identical DNA. Option C, by pairing chromosomes. Option D, by combining genes. The correct answer is option B, by copying identical DNA. Explanation. Asexually reproducing organisms achieve stability in inheritance by copying identical DNA to produce offspring. However, minor errors in DNA copying may introduce small variations, which can be beneficial or neutral. What mechanism ensures the independent inheritance of traits during gamete formation? Option A, mutation. Option B, DNA copying errors. Option C, chromosome segregation. Option D, hormonal changes. The correct answer is option C, chromosome segregation. Explanation. Independent segregation of chromosomes during meiosis ensures that traits controlled by genes on different chromosomes are inherited independently, leading to diverse combinations in the offspring. MC29. Why are recessive traits masked in the presence of dominant traits? Option A, recessive traits mutate. Option B, dominant genes are more active. Option C, dominant genes suppress recessive ones. Option D, recessive traits disappear. The correct answer is option C, dominant genes suppress recessive ones. Explanation. Dominant genes express functional proteins that determine the visible trait, whereas recessive genes do not produce such proteins or produce non-functional versions. As a result, recessive traits are masked in heterozygous conditions. 30. What is the importance of Mendel's work in understanding heredity? Option A, it explains mutations. Option B, it describes DNA structure. Option C, it establishes genetic laws. Option D, it proves evolution. The correct answer is option C, it establishes genetic laws. Explanation. Mendel's work laid the foundation for modern genetics by establishing laws of inheritance, such as dominance, segregation, and independent assortment. His experiments provided a scientific basis for understanding how traits are inherited. M31. What does Mendel's law of segregation state? Option A, traits blend together. Option B, traits are inherited independently. Option C, alleles separate during gamete formation. Option D, dominant traits always express divogaire. The correct answer is option C, alleles separate during gamete formation. Explanation. The law of segregation states that alleles for a trait separate during gamete formation, ensuring each gamete receives only one allele. This explains the reappearance of recessive traits in the F2 generation. MC 32. Why did Mendel choose pea plants for his experiments? Option A, they were hard to grow. Option B, they had many visible traits. Option C, they had limited genetic variation. Option D, they were rare. The correct answer is option B, they had many visible traits. Explanation. Mendel chose pea plants because they have distinct, easily observable traits, e.g. seed shape, flower color, reproduce quickly, and allow controlled breeding. This made them ideal for studying inheritance patterns. MCQ 33. What type of chromosomes are responsible for sex determination in humans? Option A, autosomes. Option B, sex chromosomes. Option C, identical chromosomes. Option D, paired chromosomes. The correct answer is option B, sex chromosomes. Explanation. Sex chromosomes, X and Y, are responsible for determining sex in humans. Females have two X chromosomes, XX, while males have one X and one Y chromosome, XY. The father's chromosome contribution determines the child's sex. MCQ 34. What is the role of meiosis in sexual reproduction? Option A, it reduces genetic variation. Option B, it maintains chromosome number. Option C, it doubles chromosome number. Option D, it prevents inheritance. The correct answer is option B, it maintains chromosome number. Explanation. Meiosis reduces the chromosome number in gametes to half, ensuring that fertilization restores the normal chromosome number. This process also increases genetic variation through recombination and independent assortment of chromosomes. MC 35. What did Mendel discover about the inheritance of dominant and recessive traits? Option A, dominant traits disappear. Option B, recessive traits are always expressed. Option C, dominant traits mask recessive traits. Option D, recessive traits become dominant. The correct answer is option C, dominant traits mask recessive traits. Explanation. Mendel discovered that dominant traits mask recessive traits in heterozygous individuals. Recessive traits are only expressed when both alleles are recessive, as seen in his pea plant experiments. MC 36. What does the 9:3:1 ratio observed in Mendel's dihybrid cross indicate? Option A, traits are linked. Option B, traits are independently inherited. Option C, recessive traits dominate. Option D, all traits are expressed equally. The correct answer is option B, traits are independently inherited. Explanation. Mendel's 9:1 ratio in the F2 generation of a dihybrid cross shows that traits are independently inherited. This means the inheritance of one trait does not influence the inheritance of another trait. 37. What happens when there is an error in DNA copying during reproduction? Option A, no offspring are produced. Option B, variations arise. Option C, traits disappear. Option D, chromosomes mutate. The correct answer is option B, variations arise. Explanation. Errors in DNA copying during reproduction result in variations. While most errors are neutral or harmful, some can provide a survival advantage, contributing to evolution and adaptability of the species. 38. What role does the environment play in natural selection? Option A, it creates new traits. Option B, it selects beneficial traits. Option C, it removes genetic material. Option D, it prevents reproduction. The correct answer is option B, it selects beneficial traits. Explanation. The environment selects individuals with traits that provide a survival advantage. For example, organisms with traits suited to extreme temperatures are more likely to survive and reproduce during heat waves, shaping evolutionary outcomes. MCQ 39. Why are traits like round and wrinkled seeds inherited independently? Option A, they are linked traits. Option B, they are controlled by unlinked genes. Option C, they do not follow Mendel's laws. Option D, they have no genetic basis. The correct answer is option B, they are controlled by unlinked genes. Explanation. Traits like round and wrinkled seeds are inherited independently because they are controlled by genes on different chromosomes. This independent assortment was a key observation in Mendel's dihybrid cross experiments. 40. How does DNA determine traits in an organism? Option A, by changing chromosomes. Option B, by coding for proteins. By blending traits. Option D, by mutating genes. The correct answer is option B, by coding for proteins. Explanation. DNA determines traits by coding for proteins. Each gene is a segment of DNA that provides instructions for producing a specific protein, which influences the organism's physical and functional characteristics. MCQ 41. What does Mendel's law of independent assortment explain? Option A, linked traits are inherited. Option B, traits are inherited independently. Option C, traits blend together. Option D, dominant traits suppress recessive ones. The correct answer is option B, traits are inherited independently. Explanation. Mendel's law of independent assortment explains that genes for different traits are inherited independently of one another, provided they are located on different chromosomes. This results in new combinations of traits in offspring. MCQ 42. How does DNA ensure the stability of genetic information across generations? Option A, by mutating frequently. Option B, by copying itself accurately. Option C, by changing chromosome number. Option D, by altering protein structure. The correct answer is option B, by copying itself accurately. Explanation: DNA ensures stability through accurate copying during cell division. Though minor errors, mutations, may occur, the overall process maintains genetic consistency while allowing small variations for evolution. EMS 43. What is the role of dominant traits in inheritance? Option A, they always mutate. Option B, they mask recessive traits. Option C, they are rarely expressed. Option D, they prevent variations. The correct answer is option B, they mask recessive traits. Explanation: dominant traits are expressed in the presence of a corresponding recessive trait. For example, in Mendel's experiments, tallness was a dominant trait that masked the expression of the recessive shortness trait in heterozygous individuals. MCQ 44. What does the presence of a Y chromosome in humans indicate? Option A, the individual is female. Option B, the individual is male. Option C, traits are recessive. Option D, traits are dominant. The correct answer is option B, the individual is male. Explanation: the presence of a Y chromosome in humans determines male sex. Females inherit 2 X chromosomes, while males inherit 1 X and 1 Y chromosome, XY, with the Y chromosome carrying genes for male-specific traits. MCQ 45. Why are some traits dominant while others are recessive? Option A, due to protein function. Option B, due to gene location. Option C, due to environmental factors. Option D, due to DNA mutations. The correct answer is option A, due to protein function. Explanation: traits are dominant if their genes code for functional proteins that express a particular characteristic. Recessive traits, on the other hand, result from genes that either do not produce functional proteins or are masked by dominant genes. MCQ 46. What determines the characteristics of an organism during reproduction? Option A, environmental changes. Option B, genetic material inherited. Option C, hormonal activity. Option D, chromosome mutations. The correct answer is option B, genetic material inherited. Explanation: the genetic material inherited from both parents determines an organism's characteristics. This includes both dominant and recessive traits passed on through the combination of alleles during sexual reproduction. MC 47. What is the ratio of tall to short plants in the F2 generation of Mendel's monohybrid cross? Option A, 1:1. Option B, 3:1. Option C, 9:3:3:1. Option D, 2:1. The correct answer is option B, 3:1. Explanation: Mendel observed a 3:1 phenotypic ratio in the F2 generation of his monohybrid cross, indicating that 3 out of 4 plants were tall, dominant trait, while 1 was short, recessive trait. MC 48. What mechanism allows sexually reproducing organisms to generate genetic variation? Option A, mutation. Option B, DNA replication errors. Option C, chromosome recombination. Option D, environmental effects. The correct answer is option C, chromosome recombination. Explanation: chromosome recombination during meiosis allows sexually reproducing organisms to generate genetic variation. This process shuffles genetic material, creating unique combinations of alleles in gametes. M49. Why are Mendel's experiments considered the foundation of genetics? Option A, they explained evolution. Option B, they described DNA structure. Option C, they established inheritance laws. Option D, they focused on mutations. The correct answer is option C, they established inheritance laws. Explanation: Mendel's experiments provided a scientific basis for understanding how traits are inherited across generations. His principles of segregation, dominance, and independent assortment are fundamental to modern genetics. MCQ 50. How is the sex of a human child determined at the genetic level? Option A, by DNA replication. Option B, by the father's chromosomes. Option C, by maternal traits. Option D, by environmental factors. The correct answer is option B, by the father's chromosomes. Explanation. The sex of a human child is determined by the father's chromosomes. The mother always contributes an X chromosome, while the father contributes either an X for a girl or a Y chromosome for a boy. 51. What is the importance of variation in a population? Option A, it ensures uniformity. Option B, it leads to extinction. Option C, it increases adaptability. Option D, it suppresses evolution. The correct answer is option C, it increases adaptability. Explanation. Variations in a population enhance adaptability to environmental changes, increasing the chances of survival and contributing to the evolutionary process by selecting beneficial traits through natural selection. MC 52. How does environmental selection influence the survival of traits? Option A, by eliminating variations. Option B, by selecting beneficial traits. Option C, by suppressing mutations. Option D, by promoting dominant traits. The correct answer is option B, by selecting beneficial traits. Explanation. Environmental selection ensures the survival of traits that provide a competitive advantage. For example, heat-resistant bacteria survive better during heat waves, demonstrating the role of the environment in shaping evolution. MC 53. What is the genetic constitution of the F1 generation in Mendel's monohybrid cross? Option A, homozygous dominant. Option B, heterozygous. Option C, homozygous recessive. Option D, half dominant, half recessive. The correct answer is option B, heterozygous. Explanation. In Mendel's monohybrid cross, the F1 generation is heterozygous, carrying one dominant allele and one recessive allele for the given trait. This explains why the dominant trait is expressed in all F1 individuals. MC 54. What ratio of genotypes is observed in the F2 generation of a monohybrid cross? Option A, 1. Option B, 2, 1. Option C, 1, 2. Option D, 3, 2, 1. The correct answer is option C, 1 to 2 P1. Explanation. Mendel observed a 1:1 genotypic ratio in the F2 generation of a monohybrid cross. This ratio represents one homozygous dominant, 2 heterozygous, and 1 homozygous recessive individual. MC 55. What did Mendel use as evidence for the concept of dominant and recessive traits? Option A, mutation occurrence. Option B, observations in humans. Option C, generational breeding in pea plants. Option D, DNA sequencing. The correct answer is option C, generational breeding in pea plants. Explanation. Mendel's experiments with pea plants demonstrated the concept of dominant and recessive traits by observing their expression across generations, such as the reappearance of short plants in the F2 generation. MC 56. How is sex determined in humans based on chromosomal inheritance? Option A, by maternal chromosomes. Option B, by the presence of the X chromosome. Option C, by the paternal chromosome. Option D, by random selection. The correct answer is option C, by the paternal chromosome. Explanation. Human sex determination is based on the paternal chromosome. An X chromosome from the father results in a female, XX, while a Y chromosome results in a male, XY. This pattern is central to sex determination in humans. M57. What is the effect of recombination during meiosis? Option A, reduces diversity. Option B, maintains stability. Option C, increases genetic variation. Option D, prevents mutations. The correct answer is option C, increases genetic variation. Explanation. Recombination during meiosis increases genetic variation by creating unique combinations of genetic material in gametes. This contributes to the diversity and adaptability of sexually reproducing organisms. EMS 58. Why are chromosomes paired in sexually reproducing organisms? Option A, to maintain genetic stability. Option B, to create mutations. Option C, to promote dominance. Option D, to prevent variations. The correct answer is option A, to maintain genetic stability. Explanation. Chromosomes are paired in sexually reproducing organisms to maintain genetic stability. Each individual inherits one chromosome from each parent, ensuring the continuity of genetic material across generations. MC 59. What distinguishes dominant traits from recessive traits? Option A, location on chromosomes. Option B, expression in heterozygous individuals. Option C, frequency in populations. Option D, influence on mutations. The correct answer is option B, expression in heterozygous individuals. Explanation. Dominant traits are expressed in heterozygous individuals, while recessive traits are only expressed when both alleles are recessive. This distinction explains why certain traits are more visibly expressed than others. M60. What role do alleles play in heredity? Option A, they carry mutations. Option B, they represent variations of a gene. Option C, they are identical for every trait. Option D, they only produce proteins. The correct answer is option B, they represent variations of a gene. Explanation. Alleles are different versions of a gene that determine variations in traits. For example, alleles for plant height can be either tall, dominant, or short, recessive, influencing the characteristics inherited by offspring. MQ61. What happens during fertilization in sexually reproducing organisms? Option A, chromosome number doubles. Option B, genetic material mixes. Option C, traits are blended. Option D, DNA mutates. The correct answer is option B, genetic material mixes. Explanation. During fertilization, genetic material from the male and female gametes combines, ensuring the offspring inherits traits from both parents. This mixing introduces genetic diversity within the population. MC62. Why did Mendel focus on pea plants with contrasting traits in his experiments? Option A, to study mutations. Option B, to simplify observations. Option C, to ensure controlled breeding. Option D, to study dominance only. The correct answer is option B, to simplify observations. Explanation. Mendel chose pea plants with contrasting traits such as tall, short, and round wrinkled seeds to clearly observe inheritance patterns. This simplification enabled him to deduce fundamental laws of heredity. MC63. What are the components of a gene? Option A, proteins. Option B, chromosomes. Option C, sections of DNA. Option D, RNA molecules. The correct answer is option C, sections of DNA. Genes are specific sections of DNA that contain instructions for synthesizing proteins. These proteins determine the traits and characteristics of an organism, making genes the basic units of heredity. MC64. How is the independent assortment of traits achieved during reproduction? Option A, by linked chromosomes. Option B, by random fertilization. Option C, by recombination of chromosomes. Option D, by errors in DNA copying. The correct answer is option C, by recombination of chromosomes. Explanation. The independent assortment of traits occurs due to the recombination and segregation of chromosomes during meiosis. This process allows traits to be inherited independently, as observed by Mendel in his experiments. MC65. What was the significance of Mendel's F2 generation results in monohybrid crosses? Option A, proved traits blend. Option B, demonstrated segregation. Option C, confirmed mutation theory. Option D, disproved inheritance. The correct answer is option B, demonstrated segregation. Explanation. Mendel's F2 generation results demonstrated the segregation of alleles, as traits reappeared in a 3-to-1 ratio. This confirmed that alleles for a trait separate during gamete formation and recombine during fertilization. MC66. Why do recessive traits reappear in the F2 generation after disappearing in the F1 generation? Option A, dominant traits mutate. Option B, recessive alleles segregate. Option C, linked traits separate. Option D, traits blend together. The correct answer is option B, recessive alleles segregate. Explanation. Recessive traits reappear in the F2 generation because the alleles for these traits segregate independently during gamete formation. When two recessive alleles combine, the trait becomes visible again. M67. What type of inheritance pattern is seen in sex determination in humans? Option A, blending inheritance. Option B, independent assortment. Option C, chromosomal inheritance. Option D, mutation-based inheritance. The correct answer is option C, chromosomal inheritance. Explanation. Human sex determination follows a chromosomal inheritance pattern. The X and Y chromosomes contributed by the parents decide the sex of the offspring, with males having XY chromosomes and females having XX chromosomes. M68. How does DNA recombination during meiosis benefit organisms? Option A, reduces genetic variation. Option B, introduces mutations. Option C, increases genetic variation. Option D, ensures identical offspring. The correct answer is option C, increases genetic variation. Explanation. DNA recombination during meiosis increases genetic variation by mixing parental genetic material. This genetic diversity is essential for adaptation and evolution, enabling species to survive environmental changes. MC69. What is the role of chromosomes in heredity? Option A, to proteins. Option B, to carry genes. Option C, to replicate DNA. Option D, to mutate traits. The correct answer is option B, to carry genes. Explanation. Chromosomes carry genes, which are the units of heredity. These genes store instructions for the development and functioning of organisms, passing traits from one generation to the next. MCQ 70. Why is Mendel known as the father of genetics? Option A, he discovered DNA. Option B, he explained evolution. Option C, he formulated laws of inheritance. Option D, he studied cell division. The correct answer is option C. He formulated laws of inheritance. Explanation. Mendel is called the father of genetics because he formulated the fundamental laws of inheritance, such as the laws of segregation and independent assortment, through his experiments with pea plants. MCQ 71. What is the primary outcome of Mendel's law of segregation? Option A, traits are blended. Option B, alleles segregate independently. Option C, traits disappear. Option D, traits always mutate. The correct answer is option B, alleles segregate independently. Explanation. Mendel's law of segregation states that alleles for a trait segregate independently during gamete formation. This ensures that offspring inherit one allele from each parent, maintaining genetic diversity. MCQ 72. What determines whether a plant is tall or short according to Mendel? Option A, environmental changes. Option B, dominant and recessive alleles. Option C, random mutations. Option D, DNA replication errors. The correct answer is option B, dominant and recessive alleles. Explanation. Mendel demonstrated that plant height is determined by the presence of dominant T or recessive T alleles. A plant is tall if it has at least one dominant allele and short only if both alleles are recessive. MC 73. What is the purpose of meiosis in sexually reproducing organisms? Option A, to ensure mutation. Option B, to produce identical cells. Option C, to create gametes with half the chromosome number. Option D, to prevent inheritance. The correct answer is option C, to create gametes with half the chromosome number. Explanation. Meiosis ensures that gametes have half the chromosome number of somatic cells. This process is crucial for maintaining the correct chromosome number in offspring and enabling genetic variation through recombination. MC 74. How does a single copy of a dominant allele affect a trait? Option A. It suppresses the gene. Option B. It expresses the trait. Option C. It eliminates variation. Option D. It causes mutations. The correct answer is option B. It expresses the trait. Explanation. A single copy of a dominant allele is sufficient to express the associated trait, as dominant alleles produce functional proteins that determine visible characteristics. This is why dominant traits are observed even in heterozygous conditions. MC 75. What is the genetic constitution of an organism called? Option A. Phenotype. Option B. Genotype. Option C. Chromosome. Option D. Allele. The correct answer is option B. Genotype. Explanation. The genetic constitution of an organism is called its genotype. It refers to the specific combination of alleles inherited from the parents, which determines the organism's traits or phenotype. 76. Why do recessive traits not appear in the F1 generation of a monohybrid cross? Option A. Dominant traits mutate. Option B. Recessive alleles are masked by dominant ones. Option C. Traits are linked. Option D. Recessive alleles disappear. The correct answer is option B. Recessive alleles are masked by dominant ones. Explanation. In Mendel's monohybrid cross, recessive traits do not appear in the F1 generation because the recessive alleles are masked by the presence of dominant alleles, which express the dominant trait in heterozygous individuals. M77. What role do chromosomes play during reproduction? Option A. They prevent mutations. Option B. They carry genetic information. Option C. They blend traits. Option D. They cause dominance. The correct answer is option B. They carry genetic information. Explanation. Chromosomes play a vital role during reproduction by carrying genetic information in the form of genes. These genes determine the traits and characteristics that are passed from parents to offspring. M78. What ensures equal genetic contribution from both parents and offspring? Option A. Random mutations. Option B. DNA replication. Option C. Chromosome pairing. Option D. Environmental effects. The correct answer is option C. Chromosome pairing. Explanation. Chromosome pairing during gamete formation ensures equal genetic contribution from both parents. Each parent contributes one set of chromosomes, which combine during fertilization to form the offspring's genome. MCQ 79. How does sexual reproduction promote genetic diversity? Option A. By producing identical offspring. Option B. By enabling mutation. Option C. By recombination of genes. Option D. By blending traits. The correct answer is option C, by recombination of genes. Explanation. Sexual reproduction promotes genetic diversity through the recombination of genes during meiosis. This process shuffles genetic material, creating unique combinations in the offspring and increasing adaptability to changing environments. MC 80. What happens when alleles for a single trait segregate during gamete formation? Option A. Traits are blended. Option B. Each gamete receives one allele. Option C. Chromosomes double. Option D. All traits mutate. The correct answer is option B. Each gamete receives one allele. Explanation. When alleles for a single trait segregate during gamete formation, each gamete receives only one allele for that trait. This principle is a key aspect of Mendel's law of segregation, ensuring genetic variation in offspring. MCQ 81. How does the environment affect the survival of specific traits? Option A. By mutating genes. Option B. By selecting advantageous traits. Option C. By removing dominant traits. Option D. By blending recessive traits. The correct answer is option B, by selecting advantageous traits. Explanation: the environment selects traits that provide a survival advantage. For instance, organisms with heat resistance are more likely to survive during heat waves, demonstrating how environmental pressures shape evolution and adaptability. MCQ 82. What are the two types of traits Mendel identified in his experiments? Option A, linked and unlinked. Option B, dominant and recessive. Option C, inherited and acquired. Option D, environmental and genetic. The correct answer is option B, dominant and recessive. Explanation: Mendel identified dominant traits, which are expressed when present, and recessive traits, which are masked in the presence of a dominant allele, but can reappear in subsequent generations when inherited from both parents. MQ83. What happens during the F2 generation of a dihybrid cross? Option A, traits disappear. Option B, new combinations of traits appear. Option C, all offspring look identical. Option D, traits are blended. The correct answer is option B, new combinations of traits appear. Explanation: in the F2 generation of a dihybrid cross, Mendel observed new combinations of traits due to the independent assortment of alleles. This confirmed that genes for different traits are inherited independently of each other. MCQ 84. What ensures stability of the chromosome number in sexually reproducing organisms? Option A, mutations. Option B, meiosis and fertilization. Option C, DNA replication errors. Option D, environmental effects. The correct answer is option B, meiosis and fertilization. Explanation: stability of the chromosome number is ensured through meiosis, which reduces the chromosome number in gametes, and fertilization, which restores the original chromosome number by combining genetic material from both parents. MCQ 85. How are traits like seed shape and seed color inherited in Mendel's experiments? Option A, independently. Option B, through mutations. Option C, by linked genes. Option D, by blending traits. The correct answer is option A, independently. Explanation: Mendel observed that traits like seed shape and seed color are inherited independently of each other. This independent assortment occurs because the genes controlling these traits are located on different chromosomes. MCQ 86. What is the difference between genotype and phenotype? Option A, genotype is visible, phenotype is not. Option B, phenotype is the visible trait, genotype is the genetic makeup. Option C, both are always identical. Option D, genotype depends on environmental factors. The correct answer is option B. Phenotype is the visible trait, genotype is the genetic makeup. Explanation: genotype refers to the genetic makeup of an organism, while phenotype refers to the observable traits. For example, a plant with the genotype TT for height has the phenotype of being tall due to the dominance of the T allele. MCQ 87. What type of traits are expressed in a heterozygous organism? Option A, only recessive traits. Option B, only dominant traits. Option C, both dominant and recessive traits equally. Option D, mutated traits only. The correct answer is option B, only dominant traits. Explanation: in heterozygous organisms, only dominant traits are expressed because the dominant allele masks the effect of the recessive allele. Recessive traits are only expressed when both alleles are recessive. MC 88. How do Mendel's experiments demonstrate the concept of independent assortment? Option A, by observing mutations. Option B, by crossing plants with two traits. Option C, by blending traits. Option D, by studying a single trait. The correct answer is option B, by crossing plants with two traits. Explanation: Mendel demonstrated independent assortment by crossing plants with two traits, such as seed shape and color, and observing that the traits were inherited independently, resulting in a 9:3:1 ratio in the F2 generation. MQ 89. What determines the reappearance of recessive traits in the F2 generation? Option A, environmental factors. Option B, segregation of alleles. Option C, DNA copying errors. Option D, blending of traits. The correct answer is option B, segregation of alleles. Explanation. Recessive traits reappear in the F2 generation because alleles segregate independently during gamete formation. When two recessive alleles combine, the recessive trait becomes visible. MCQ 90. Why is meiosis essential for sexual reproduction? Option A, to double the DNA. Option B, to maintain genetic stability. Option C, to remove mutations. Option D, to produce identical offspring. The correct answer is option B, to maintain genetic stability. Explanation. Meiosis is essential for sexual reproduction because it reduces the chromosome number by half, ensuring genetic stability across generations. It also introduces variation through recombination and independent assortment of chromosomes. MQ 91. What did Mendel observe when crossing pea plants with round and wrinkled seeds? Option A, all offspring were wrinkled. Option B, all offspring were round. Option C, round seeds were dominant. Option D, wrinkled seeds were dominant. The correct answer is option C, round seeds were dominant. Explanation. Mendel observed that all F1 offspring had round seeds, demonstrating the dominance of the round seed trait. Wrinkled seeds reappeared in the F2 generation, indicating it was a recessive trait. 92. What is the outcome of Mendel's experiments on dihybrid crosses? Option A, linked traits dominate. Option B, new traits appear. Option C, traits are inherited independently. Option D, traits mutate frequently. The correct answer is option C, traits are inherited independently. Explanation. Mendel's dihybrid cross experiments showed that traits are inherited independently, resulting in new combinations of traits, such as round green and wrinkled yellow seeds in the F2 generation. MCQ 93. How does recombination during meiosis contribute to evolution? Option A, by ensuring uniform traits. Option B, by introducing genetic diversity. Option C, by removing dominant traits. Option D, by blending characteristics. The correct answer is option B, by introducing genetic diversity. Explanation. Recombination during meiosis shuffles genetic material, creating unique combinations of alleles. This genetic diversity is crucial for evolution as it provides a population with the adaptability needed to survive environmental changes. 4. What is the primary difference between sexual and asexual reproduction in terms of variation? Option A, sexual reproduction lacks variation. Option B, asexual reproduction introduces more variation. Option C, sexual reproduction creates greater variation. Option D, both create the same variation. The correct answer is option C, sexual reproduction creates greater variation. Explanation. Sexual reproduction generates greater variation by combining genetic material from two parents. In contrast, asexual reproduction produces genetically identical offspring, except for minor variations caused by errors in DNA replication. MQ 95. What is the function of DNA in heredity? Option A, to prevent mutations. Option B, to code for traits. Option C, to create new chromosomes. Option D, to ensure uniformity. The correct answer is option B, to code for traits. Explanation. DNA functions as the carrier of genetic information, encoding the instructions for synthesizing proteins that determine traits. It ensures that hereditary characteristics are passed from one generation to the next. MQ 96. How did Mendel explain the dominance of traits in the F1 generation? Option A, by studying linked traits. Option B, by observing mutations. Option C, by proposing dominant and recessive alleles. Option D, by blending traits. The correct answer is option C, by proposing dominant and recessive alleles. Explanation. Mendel explained that traits in the F1 generation are determined by dominant alleles, which mask the effect of recessive alleles. This concept was key in understanding inheritance patterns in pea plants. MCQ 97. Why do only recessive traits appear in homozygous recessive organisms? Option A. Dominant traits are absent. Option B. Recessive traits mutate. Option C. Traits are linked. Option D. Recessive traits blend. The correct answer is option A. Dominant traits are absent. Explanation. Recessive traits appear in homozygous recessive organisms because there are no dominant alleles present to mask their expression. This allows the recessive trait to be fully expressed in the phenotype. MC 98. What ensures the independent inheritance of traits located on different chromosomes? Option A. DNA mutations. Option B. Meiosis and segregation. Option C. Dominance of traits. Option D. Blending of alleles. The correct answer is option B. Meiosis and segregation. Explanation. The independent assortment of chromosomes during meiosis ensures that traits located on different chromosomes are inherited independently. This was demonstrated in Mendel's dihybrid cross experiments. MCQ 99. Why does the Y chromosome determine male sex in humans? Option A. It carries the dominant gene. Option B. It pairs with the X chromosome. Option C. It has male-specific genes. Option D. It prevents variation. The correct answer is option C. It has male-specific genes. Explanation. The Y chromosome determines male sex because it carries male-specific genes, including the SRY gene, which triggers the development of male characteristics. The presence of a Y chromosome in an individual results in the male phenotype. 100. What did Mendel conclude about the inheritance of two traits in a dihybrid cross? Option A. Traits are blended. Option B. Traits are inherited independently. Option C. One trait always dominates. Option D. Traits mutate together. The correct answer is option B. Traits are inherited independently. Explanation. Mendel concluded that in a dihybrid cross, two traits are inherited independently of each other, leading to new combinations of traits. This observation formed the basis of his law of independent assortment. Thank you for joining us on ExHub MCQs Channel. We hope these 100 multiple-choice questions on heredity have helped you strengthen your understanding of genetic inheritance, dominant and recessive traits, Mendel's laws, and the role of DNA in passing traits across generations. Heredity plays a crucial role in shaping life, ensuring that characteristics are transmitted from parents to offspring, while allowing for variations that drive evolution. Understanding the principles of heredity helps us grasp fundamental concepts in biology, genetics, and even medical sciences. From Mendel's groundbreaking experiments with pea plants to the modern understanding of chromosomes and DNA, heredity remains a fascinating and essential topic in science. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to ExHub MCQs Channel for more educational content. Hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest videos covering various subjects, including physics, chemistry, biology, and competitive exam preparations. Keep practicing, stay curious, and never stop learning. If you have any questions or need further clarification, feel free to leave a comment below. See you in the next session with another exciting topic. This is ExHub MCQs Channel, where learning meets excellence.